We're now officially 7 days until the 2022 NHL entry draft in Montreal. We have a mock draft. You guys heard the episode of the mock draft last week, but now it's time to break it down and compare it to other mock drafts and see how close we are and see what to get excited for. All that on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlock right beside me. On today's episode of Locked On Coyotes, I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available everywhere you get your shows: Apple, Google, Spotify, and the Audacy app, also on YouTube. We got a great show for you guys on today. We are talking about the mock draft, things are going quickly, though. We got 7 days until the NHL draft, so we're going to do the mock draft. And we have the rankings, which I'm going to show in a little bit, that was put together by the Locked On NHL channel. So every host who picked in the top 16 put a pick out there of who they believe their team is going to pick. Obviously, pick number 3 was picked by myself for the Arizona Coyotes. You'll see who that's going to be in just a little bit. But I can't believe 7 days, Carl. 7 days.
Yeah, it's fun. The draft is coming up, which is going to be a lot of work for the two of us, especially with how many picks the Coyotes have, and especially with how many picks the Coyotes have in a short amount of time. I also recently just participated in a mock draft on the SB Nation sites. I am the managing editor of Five for Howling, if you weren't aware. So we also had a draft. It's crazy to see like how different some of the drafts are, and it reinforces what like a lot of the prospect people we talked to said. Like the top 5 are probably set. Anything beyond that for like the next 30 picks could go like any which way,
which is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And what's interesting is how things have changed in just the last month, right? Obviously, we're going to show it in just a little bit, but even in the top 4, right, there has still been some shift around to the point where there's like no true consensus of where certain players are within the top 4.
Yeah, we are especially seeing a lot of like interesting results with the top 2, which is just kind of really fun to watch. And then like, I don't know if it feels like the Coyotes could theoretically still get Shane Wright at number 3 in a way that I don't think we thought really possible. That seems like very unlikely, like 1% chance maybe, but like more than I would have said like going into like the draft like up until the past couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Let's now actually take a look at the at our mock draft that we have from the Locked On NHL group, and it shows that for us at Locked On, Shane Wright is still number 1. Wright-Slafkovsky goes number 2, and the Arizona Coyotes will be picking Logan Cooley. Very interesting. And again, and the rest of it's very interesting. There were some surprising things on this one, Carl, that definitely caught us off guard. Got both of us off guard. But again, like we said, it kind of reinforced the idea of that. It's a right after 4, there's really it could go anywhere.
Well, I mean, if you want to start with even the top 3, we looked at Bob McKenzie and Corey Proman's draft rating. Both of them had Slafkovsky going first overall. And then in my mock draft for the SB Nation sites, I couldn't even get Cooley, but I got Slafkovsky. So I do think that is like a really good illustration of what you mentioned before, like the fact that there's been some shakeup in the top players.
I am going to throw in a wrench to you also, because something that we have in front of us, the comparison from our locked on mock draft with Bob McKenzie and Corey Promen. So with two prominent reporters, I've got one more reporter who's got another one, and that has a different a slightly different way the top three is going to go.
Okay.
And this is from Daily Faceoff's Chris Peters.
Another good source.
Another really good source, where he has 1 Logan Cooley, 2 Shane Wright, and 3 Uri Slafkovsky.
That is, I am really loving the kind of top 3 and the way it's working out. Because the Coyotes are drafting 3rd overall, it makes it seem like much better. Like seeing these like players who like in any other draft, like I don't know. Do you remember such a like strong top 3?
No, I don't. Like, I can't say I can really remember it going for me, but it's crazy.
I mean, I guess if you have Marner as the 3rd overall, that would have been
maybe, yeah. That was a pretty big draft, but
but I mean, he wasn't kind of like the universal top 3. Like the Coyotes made a mistake in not doing that draft. It wasn't like an off the board mistake though.
The most amazing thing to me is just in general of the fact that Shane Wright is no longer the consensus number 1. At the lottery, he still was the consensus number 1. Then something happened in just the last month or so. He's no longer in the consensus.
Well, that is kind of one of those things. I did study psychology in college. I do often wonder if sometimes when we get down to the draft, we start overthinking things. Like a lot of people are looking at a lot of data and just over and over again, and that can cause you to second guess yourself. It'll be interesting to see like what the actual GMs end up doing.
I think the interesting thing, like the most interesting thing, is Bob McKenzie's though, because he's, I think, predicted the number 1 draft pick more often than not. And he has Slafkovsky go 1, which is interesting. Which is, again, I mean, but what's amazing is how we look at 4 different sources, and all pretty different in their own ways, right? With that top 4.
Well, I was just remembering, I think we were doing, an episode about Slafkovsky. Like, I don't remember thinking the Coyotes would get him. Like,
we knew he would be gone by 3. Like,
yeah.
in the way that we've thought that, like, I think you and I have agreed on that, and based off of when we had who was it, Tony Ferrari. When we had Tony Ferrari on, you kind of get based on the understanding of how Slafkovsky is. There's a very little chance he would have dropped the 3. Which is interesting because you think of how it is now. It's like, oh yeah, it makes more sense because he, with all but 1 of the 4 that we mentioned, Slafkovsky is top 2.
Yeah. That is definitely the case, and does he go number 1 overall? Is that kind of, if you're Montreal, what is that decision you make?
I mean, I think the interesting thing is because there was during most of the season, because there was so much hype behind Shane Wright, I feel like if they don't pick Shane Wright, I think Montreal might riot.
I mean, I don't know how big he is in Montreal right now. But you are right. There was a lot of buildup. There was a lot of hype, and part of what you do for drafting is you reward hype. Um, although we often see teams end up kicking themselves for kind of like going in for something like that and being like pot committed to something that could very well change. Although I'm sure for these teams who have been watching these players for years and years, like they gotta trust their scouting department and be like, no, this is who it should be. I'm just confused by New Jersey. Like they seem like they could throw a wrench into anything.
Yeah, they could do whatever they want. It's interesting, and here's a thought process that I have to think about. Right now that we know that the top three is very contested, um, New Jersey. The reason why based off the mock draft, we was discussion with our locked on crew. The reason why, and I know we have a break coming up in just a sec, but the reason why um, the locked on Devils guy did not pick Logan Cooley is because they said they didn't need a center, so that's why they picked Slafkovsky. So
Sure.
what happens if Slafkovsky goes one and you have two centers at the next two best available? What do? Um, that's a big question. That's something that's what made me thought, and then that's when I said like, wait, so is there a possibility Shane Wright could be available at three? Like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Like theoretically, and I know we gotta get to the break. Like New Jersey could be at 2 and be like, you know what? We need a defenseman. We're gonna just draft position, and then like the Coyotes could choose between Wright and Cooley, which who would have thought that would happen?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We still got to get to more. Get to we're breaking down the Locked On NHL mock draft as well as comparing it to other mock drafts out there in the wild. Before we get into any more conversation about it, though, we do have to get a quick word from Carl.
I have a message from our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the latest sports development, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. We're heading into the NHL draft. I'm sure there's going to be a lot on BetOnline for that. It'll be interesting to see what kind of options they have, like maybe trading picks. That could be a fun thing to wager on. And you can head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so final thought I want to give Carl before we move on to kind of like other things with this with the mock drafts, and based on the conversation that we were just having. If Shane Wright falls to number 3 and the Coyotes draft Shane Wright, and just like if it happens, in the crazy world that it happens, I feel like I don't know, we gotta do something on the air, something crazy, like shotgun a beer or something.
Sure. We could definitely shotgun a beer if the Coyotes manage to do that. I'm sure we will be celebrating on everything. I don't think it'll happen. And if it does, it'll be one of those like there'll be a lot of think pieces on NHL websites to kind of see what happened because that is just not where we thought anything would be. And then, Wright's not going to completely turn around the team, so they'll probably still be bad next year.
Well, because we're not going to rush him either. So it's like, yeah, you know what? We'll wait till you're perfect, and then you can come over, and that's how it's going to work for anybody that they pick.
Absolutely. I don't think the Coyotes expect anyone to play for them like next season, except maybe at the very end.
Yeah, and that goes to kind of the conversation that we had with Tony Ferrari. He was like, yeah, a reason maybe you pick Slafkovsky is that you can have him close and monitor for him, have him go straight to the Roadrunners if you want him to, because there's no restriction on that. Wright will still be under the CHL agreement where he can't go yet, and then Cooley is committed to play at University of Minnesota in the NCAA, so you won't get as much with those.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm sure the Coyotes are fine either way. They were happy to have Dylan Gunther not be close, although, like, maybe having Slafkovsky, in the AHL, maybe call him up for a couple of games. There's no harm in that.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at some of the rest of the stuff on here for our mock draft. Mainly, I think one thing we should get to is notable absences, right? Because there are two players that are not on this list that surprised me, Carl, in the top
Okay.
16. Those two players are Matthew Savoy and Connor Geeky.
Yeah, I mean, definitely two players. We were talking about Promin and McKenzie. Both had him in the top 10. Let me see if I can find him on the SB Nation one. Connor Geeky, top 10, and Savoy, top 10. So Lockdown hosts really didn't take a shine to him. I do find that very interesting. It definitely goes to what everyone has been saying, where like beyond 5, it's a real crapshoot. The player that really stood out, that kind of marketed that for me, is Frank Nazar went number 6 overall. He wasn't really like planned to be that high. Columbus saw something that they like though.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that surprised me too. Like I was looking like Frank Nazar. I don't think I saw that name on very many of these very many of these other lists listed very high up, and I was like, so this is a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I think a lot of people who pay attention to like teams, they're going to be like, this is a specific area. And if I can expect all of these people to be generally about okay, or like about the same level, if they fill like a specific niche, or if they seem like they fit the coaching style, honestly, like I was reading like a report on Frank Nazar, I'm like, I mean, he seems like a Connor Garland type player. Connor Garland's hot right now. Maybe try and draft the next Connor Garland, although he wasn't really compared to Connor Garland in the comparison, but that was just like kind of what I saw as the player.
Absolutely. I think other than that though, I think the top 5 was wasn't very surprising, right? We
No.
knew the top 5 was going to consist of those 5 players, right? Slafkovsky, Cooley, Nemec, and Juracek. Like,
Yeah.
And then with 6, like my number 6, like maybe even hitting the top 5 was Matthew Savoy, and that's in my personal rankings, but of course didn't reach it in this one. I'm looking in the other comparisons. You said the other two have him. The other ones have him in top 10. Chris Peters has Savoy right at 10. So yeah, you said it's very different. Very different. Brad Lambert is on 8 on this one, which is higher than some other ones.
Yeah. Ones I'm seeing aren't seeing him in the top 10, but if you feel like your team needs a center, and Brad Lambert speaks to you, he speaks to you. It does kind of, something that I brought up when we were talking with Corey and Richie is the idea of like, could the Coyotes theoretically trade one of their latter first round picks and something to move up in the draft? And I don't think they really thought so, but like looking at these mock drafts, like seeing where people are available, like at a certain point, if you're the Coyotes and things go the way that they did for the lockdown, and you can get the 17th overall pick and Matt Savoy, Do you make that call? I don't know.
Or even Connor Geeky, right?
Yeah.
If he gets down there, like both of those would be a player you'd really want, especially Matt Savoy, because we have when we had Russ Cohen on, he's just like very very skilled player. In in his eyes, he's like if he's like like he'd be surprised if he gets past 5, which in this draft he got past 16. So like what happened? But
And I
yeah,
don't want people to think the lockdown draft was like overly like off what others are. Case in point, going 14th overall, Denton Melichuk, not sure if I pronounced that correctly, went one higher than he did in the Corey Proman draft, but 10 or 10 lower in the Mackenzie draft. I think I'm reading that right. Why do I take notes when I can never read them properly?
absolutely. But but yeah, there are a lot of things that are different. Although I do have a theory of how Savoy ended up falling in the lockdown draft, and it's not based off the hosts who selected just didn't want Savoy. To be honest, I think they didn't even pay attention to the fact that he was still available. Like people, we're going through our mock draft and we make our picks each individually. We tease the next person to put. I'm pretty sure once they got past like 5 or 6, someone probably everyone probably assumed he was already gone, without even looking at the list, and they all and coupled with that, already had assumed that he was already be gone at that point, and already had a preset person they had in mind for that draft number.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I do like secretly suspect that's what happened to allow the Coyotes to draft Jacob Chikrin, because he was supposed to be like top like defensive prospect or two, top 5. He fell to 16th. And yeah, GMs are human. They make stupid calls sometimes, and sometimes hosts of podcasts also make those same calls where they're just like, there's no way that person's available. I'm not even gonna check. I'm just gonna like go with what I have being realistic at this point. And that's where I think a GM like Bill Armstrong could like swoop in, because I imagine he's the type that pays attention to that kind of thing.
Absolutely. That and like I could see that happening too, right? And that's the only case of I can see of a reason why the Coyotes can trade up in a sense, right? And not too high. Like I don't think like trading back into the top 10 is even worth it, right?
No.
Like okay, no, you don't need to do that. But as you mentioned, if like Matthew Savoy or Connor Geeky or a lot of players end up actually falling into like the 17 to 20 territory, maybe you do consider trading up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are any options that aren't going to be on the table for the Coyotes. If it can make the team better, then they are going to consider it.
Absolutely, and it's amazing to follow all these, looking at the mock drafts and whatever. This is my favorite time of year, Carl. Like I love looking at mock drafts. I love seeing how things go, and coupled with that, I love seeing redrafts. Right, seeing like looking at 10 years later, like okay, this was a mock draft then. This is what ended up actually happening. Now let's see the redraft. What would have been different? Who would have gotten where? Like.
That is always good. I like redrafts more than mock drafts, just because I feel like redrafts take the team into account more than mock drafts do. Like mock drafts, especially the ones we're looking at, they're like, this person's here because they are the best player, not necessarily they're filling the need for that specific team, because the people who are best at prospects, they're focused on things that are other than the teams in a lot of cases. So I am right there with you on redrafts.
Yeah, it will be like I absolutely love them. Like anything regarding the draft, I love it. Right? Because even though like I'm not huge on prospects, I'm not following prospects 100% of the time and being like, okay, that's like this person does this person does this. Like that's why we bring on experts who do that for us, right? And it kind of
Uh,
give us that understanding.
sure.
It's as we get closer, the hype surrounding it, seeing where things are gonna go. Like especially if this one next year might be even more so with the Connor Bedard year. There's so much going on there.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at it, theoretically, the Coyotes could get Shane Wright and Connor Bedard, like in a drafting third and first overall situation. Uh, so that would be pretty nifty. I will say that.
If that happens, like if I could do something else we're going to do if the Coyotes get Bedard too. Like
Yeah,
I don't like my mind will just might just explode. Like
yeah. We'll print T-shirts. We will invent a special Bedard drink, a cocktail of sorts. Uh, I'm not sure what it'll be yet, but it'll be a thing. And I think kind of the most important thing about these mock drafts are the Coyotes are going to get a really solid pick. Just I really hope Bill Armstrong doesn't like whiff on this one because this seems like it's setting up to be like a slam dunk draft.
it will be yeah, it definitely seems that way. Anything off of our mock draft in comparison to any of the others that are surprising to you that you think that that we should bring up for our listeners?
Uh, hmm. I am looking. Uh, I thought that Isaac Howard and Rutger McGrody, they're two interesting players. They went 15th and 16th on our draft, but completely different opposite ends for Mackenzie and Praman. And I think that's a very interesting call. I will also say the picks aren't out, so I can't mention them on the air just yet. But on Friday, I'm going to have my two picks for the Coyotes' last two picks, and I maybe reached with a couple of them too. So I think everyone, like especially like beyond the top three, like there's some reaching involved. And I think that when we do our full draft, there'll be some picks where people are like, "Wow, they went off board with that one," but there's just so many boards right now.
Absolutely. It just goes to show that this year's draft isn't as like crazy deep and exciting as we thought, but there's still like the excitement of the unknown because of
It
that.
it's deep in a very specific
It's
way.
it's deep. This is deep in the way where it like is like it's top heavy, then the top five, and then after that you have we have no idea. Um, in the sense of next year's draft, it's top heavy. We're in the fence in the sense where like the top like 5, 6, 7 picks, maybe even like more than that, are gonna be good players.
I do think there's like something that should be said. Like in normal years, like when you're getting to like the high 20s and the 30s, it's basically a second round pick at that point. This year it feels a little bit more like it's almost like the first like 10 picks of the second round is going to be a first round plus. At least from some of the things I'm seeing.
I
Like
can see that.
so
Yeah,
it's deep in that way, and I think the fact that the Coyotes have the 7 picks in the first 45, that's going to really benefit them.
oh, it would
But
absolutely benefit them.
yeah, it's not like they can get like a superstar at 27th or 32nd overall,
No,
though.
no, absolutely not. You might find a top nine forward.
Yeah. Or who knows, like because players are definitely weird, and we have seen 32nd overall picks just go on to absolutely annihilate the league.
Absolutely. But that was our mock draft analysis episode. Lots of crazy things going on. Once again, 7 days left until the NHL entry draft in Montreal. We're going to have a lot of coverage for the day of. We'll probably announce more details as we get closer, but it's going to be a big day. You're going to want to stay locked in to Locked On Coyotes and the entire Locked On Podcast Network. We'll have a lot of stuff coming your way. That's it for today's episode, though. Hope you guys like what you heard. If you did, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, on Instagram at LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leano. It's Robyn with a Y_LEANO. Carl Pavlock is Carl Pavlock FFH. Interact with us, ask the question you might have. We might answer right back or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.